We are living in a new age of exotic tourism where for the small fee of $250,000, you too can become a mission specialist on a voyage to the bottom of the sea to visit the Titanic, which sank in 13,000 feet of water 111 years ago off the coast of Newfoundland. Well, you actually can't do it anymore because that all went down the drain about a week ago. And while there were only a few takers able to spree such a large fee for the privilege to do that, there were over 570 individuals who sprang many tens of thousands of dollars, in some cases well over $100,000 for a chance to be guided up Mount Everest. It's a dangerous game, the exotic tourism world. On Everest this year, 17 people perished for the chance to stand on the top of the world. And everybody who is anybody who has been on the internet, been watching the news, been scanning social media, knows about the submersible called Titan, which failed, killing 5 passengers on board. I will readily admit that I was absolutely glued to the news cycle and felt a sick feeling in my stomach the entire time. For some reason, I couldn't get out of my mind the 19-year-old kid, the son of the billionaire who went aboard with his dad. And I was reading that he was terrified before he climbed on board the submersible. To me, for some reason, that was just a lasting image, and I still to this day have not been able to get it out of my mind. All right, so later in the video, I'm going to ask a question that I hope you'll stick around for, and it relates directly to this Everest Mystery Channel. But first, let's get this one thing straight. In this day and age, only people living in privilege can actually have the luxury to pay for adventures that aren't essential to our survival. 10,000 years ago or 100,000 years ago, when a group of people needed to, say, go across the Bering Strait to cross from Europe or Russia into North America, that was for survival, not for the hell of it, for the adventure of it. And then 200,000 years ago, the African Exodus, where people from the African continent expanded and looked around the world for places to settle. Those are examples, yes, of exploration, but for the absolute need of survival. And we are pampered here in this day and age. Just the idea of having a roof over my head is something that a couple thousand years ago would have been such an immense luxury. People lived in caves to protect themselves from storms, and now all I have to do is turn the heat up on the wall when it's cold outside, or light a wood stove to keep warm in the winter if the heat goes out. I'm also somebody who loves the idea of exploration. I'm a member of the Explorers Club. I too got this sweatshirt. I had to pay $60 for it on top of the $500 annual membership fee that you have to pay to be a member of the Explorers Club. The idea of the Explorers Club is that for every expedition you go on that carries a flag of the Explorers Club, you need to be doing some scientific research and add to the body of scientific knowledge in the world. My expeditions that counted, if you will, to get me into the Explorers Club included the discovery, or filming the discovery, of George Mallory in 1999 on Mount Everest, and also in 2003, I helped construct a ship made of 2.5 million totara reeds that we harvested and sailed a ship made of those reeds 2,500 some odd miles from the coast of South America to Easter Island. And the reason that we were doing that was to see if it was possible for South American mariners to migrate westwardly toward eastern Polynesia, and we wanted to prove or disprove if it might have been in fact possible for an ancient styled reed ship to do such a thing. So some time ago, I did an interview with one of the most esteemed members of the Explorers Club. He's a gentleman by the name of Don Walsh. You could say Don Walsh is the Neil Armstrong of the deep sea. In 1960, Don and Jacques Piccard were aboard the Bathyscaphe Trieste when it made a record maximum descent into Challenger Deep, the deepest point of the world's oceans. The depth was measured at over 35,000 feet, almost 36,000 feet. And it just seems like this is an apropos time to talk about my interview with Don Walsh, which will be released within the next week. And I will put the link of that in this story. And what Don talked about was the difference between exploration and adventure. And that was the focus of our conversation. Teaser alert. He says there's a huge difference between adventure and exploration. I think we all know that. I did a bunch of research about the Trieste around the time that I interviewed Don Walsh for the first time in 2004, and I learned that a pinhole-sized hole in the side of the vessel would have shot water inside the vessel at such a force that it would have cut a human body in half. Now, that's actually impossible because instead of that happening, a pinhole-sized hole would actually destroy the entire vessel and there'd be a complete impact and explosion of sorts if that did, in fact, take place. As we all know, with the Titan, the consequences were devastating and final. So after being glued to the news cycle during this futile search for the Titan, I was actually most spellbound by the reaction on the internet and in social media, finding that a large number of people that I'm friends with on Facebook or follow on Instagram, that they took an amazing amount of joy and satisfaction in the idea that a group of billionaires would find such a devastating fate in the deep and dark depths of the Atlantic. So it hearkened me to these conversations I would have with an old friend of mine who I used to work with right after I got out of Boston University. And he used to talk about morose delectation. He's a Catholic monk, and he would talk about people who get lingering pleasure out of holding on to, if you will, prurient or evil thoughts. And he expanded on the idea to discuss people who found great pleasure in the suffering and failures of others. And this, the Titan, fits that to a T. So given so many people's reactions to this gruesome disaster, it was magnified greatly because the people on board were billionaires. So why the hell does that happen? Why do people take such satisfaction in it? I found it super fascinating, and from an intellectual point of view, I could see why it was happening, but billionaire or poverty-stricken or whatever, we all share the same commonality. These were individuals, I suppose, like me, people who are trying to evolve the soul. We're on this planet and we're sharing that same curiosity of the unknown, trying to evolve and go to places that we don't understand. And sometimes that takes place by going on adventures or explorations that push us to limits where we do not know the ending, where there's even a possibility of dying in the process. I look at the people on the Titan in the exact same way I look at people who want to climb Mount Everest. It brings us to a place of extreme danger, to a place that forces us to come out of our sphere of understanding, to reconsider our place on this planet. So really, billionaire or not, are those people any different than me or you? I don't think so. So my first response was to look at the situation with the Titan with a lot of empathy. And, how it was perceived in the internet was very peculiar. There were so many people that were just loving what was happening. I used to say to my sons when they were kids, I'd say, the way we react to another person's misfortunes or foibles and the things that we say about them says a lot more about us and ourselves than it does about the person that we're shitting all over. Even if that person is doing awful things and is the most evil, vile human being in the world, if we go spewing about it on the internet, it really looks worse about us than it does about that very person. So God forbid somebody shows even a bit of empathy for 5 people aboard who are billionaires or whatever. They were really just out to experience adventure and curiosity and go to some place different that would change their perspective on living and who they were as a being on this planet. Although I will say the guy who owns the company, Stockton Rush, I think he deserves a little bit more scrutiny, and I do not think that history is going to treat this gentleman very well. It sounds a little bit like he was pushing these people beyond their safety limit to get them to come on board, telling them that it was a lot safer than it obviously was. And so now you ask, Why the hell are you doing a video about the Titanic and the Titan on this Everest Mystery Channel? But the truth is, I relish in the idea of taking part in exploration and expanding upon the knowledge of the world, not just the idea of having an adventure for the hell of having an adventure. So maybe with the disaster of the Titan, we're reaching an inflection point in the world of commercialization, of adventure sold as exploration, of the sorts that might bring a magnifying glass over certain endeavors, exactly like happened when the Titanic sank 111 years ago. All I can hope is that in the aftermath of a disaster like this, things will change, such as perhaps there'll be the inauguration of a regulatory board. So again, with the Titan, I'm hoping or wondering if there might be some kind of sea change in the world of the commercialization of adventures, where I've called for many times on Mount Everest that there should be some governing body that would oversee the companies who are guiding people to the top of the mountain. It so turns out that most of the people who die on guided commercial expeditions are people who are on the lower budget expedition companies paying less money with less experienced guides and high altitude guides and climbers. There is absolutely no regulatory board to hold companies like that accountable, nor is there one to hold a company such as OCEANGATE accountable. Now, one thing I find a side curiosity is the OCEANGATE website is still up and operating, and you can go on there, at least as of this recording, and look at their page, how they're trying to sell the idea of going under to the Titanic in the submersible Titan. It just seems like mind-boggling to me that they didn't immediately take the website down. So the question that I wanted to ask, do you think there should be a regulatory board that oversees expeditions such as those submersibles going to 20,000 feet or so, or companies that are guiding people to the top of Mount Everest that might not necessarily legally, but at least in terms of internal governing, hold accountable the people who are bringing people on expeditions to go to dangerous places? What do you think? Yes or no? I'm going to have that question. I want to know in your thoughts. Let me know what you think. Should there be a governing board that oversees operations on dangerous expeditions that purport to be exploration, at least adventures that we know of? In the coming week, I will be publishing my amazing interview with Don Walsh from the Explorers Club on my podcast called The Happiness Quotient, as well as my podcast called Because It's There. Look for that in the next week or so, and I will post a link when that episode is live in the notes to this video. In the meantime, if you've enjoyed this video, I hope you'll take a moment to subscribe. Do a kind deed, take care of yourself and those around you. Make the world a better place. Peace out, my friends. Have a beautiful day.